Almost everyone I know calls me Jo, and I have been in Launceston since 2012. But I grew up in Penang, Malaysia, and I have two older brothers, and my mum now lives with me. So growing up, I would describe my childhood as a happy one, quite a wholesome one. I don't say that lightly because throughout my childhood, my dad, although he was a part of the family unit, was almost not present for most of my years on a daily basis. He worked very hard and tended to prioritize life outside of work with his friends. The reason my childhood was happy is that my mum, Vicky, intentionally parented us, and that's quoting Kim from a few weeks ago. My mum was very, very keen to bring us up in the ways of God. So we almost always spent time in church on a Sunday, and throughout the week we were engaged with our friends from church, and we grew up with a community of Christian friends around us the whole time. So I stayed in Malaysia till I was 17. Because I was a good student, I managed to get a scholarship to go to the UK to further my studies. There starts the dark period in my life, I guess. I was in the UK for about 14 years, and despite the fact that I progressed as a professional, I got my degree as a doctor and proceeded to carry on with my postgraduate training, I really fell away from God and church at that stage. Part of the reason is because Christianity is pretty much dead in the UK. I had very few Christian friends. When I was in medical school in my third year, my dad actually left the family unit to pursue his own life. And that was an extremely difficult time in my life. In addition to that, my best friend, who I traveled to England with from Malaysia, got meningitis in her first year of medical school and passed away. So the years between 1998 and 2000 were extremely difficult years for me. And my mum was on her own in Malaysia when my dad left. So essentially my brothers had left home, and my mum was on her own. And I used to speak to her often and worry about her, but being the stalwart that she is and a person of God with true faith, she used to quote me her favorite verse in the Bible. It's from Habakkuk 3:17. Though the fig tree does not bud and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails and the fields produce no food, though there are no sheep in the pen, no cattle in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Saviour. Having that sort of strength in front of you makes you reevaluate a lot of things in life, and so I carried on with that guidance from my mum and from God. From the time that my dad left, things were very strained between us, my siblings and my father, but gradually God, in His grace, healed that relationship. We never really got the opportunities to spend a lot of time with my dad again, but I would visit him with Ben and my sons whenever we visited Malaysia. Gradually the relationship repaired. Then COVID hit, and I was unable to see him for about 3 years because I hadn't been to see him even before COVID. And he was getting older, and finally last year in August, my middle brother was turning 50, and I said to Ben, I really want to go back and celebrate that momentous occasion with him, but I also wanted to visit my dad. I didn't tell my dad that I was arriving home in Malaysia, but on the day that my brother and I arrived in Penang, my dad called my brother and he said, have you heard from Joanne? I haven't spoken to her for quite a while. I'm not sure when I'm going to see her. And my brother said, actually, we're both in Penang and we're coming to see you tomorrow. And so we went to visit my dad, and he was not well. He was just very frail. There was nothing particularly wrong that I could see, but he just looked very weak and frail. We had a good meal with him. We said a prayer. And just before I left him, I prayed with him and asked God to give him peace and joy and protect him in all things. And my brother and I left. As we were traveling back to my brother's place, which was about 4 hours away, we got a call that my dad was unconscious. Sadly, he passed away the day after we visited him. And when I reflect back on that situation, I think God was still being gracious to me in giving me that time with my dad on his last day for us to truly be at peace with ourselves and with everything that had happened, and for forgiveness to fully take place. So that's another example of how God has been gracious to me.